What's up guys, also Football Talk here, finally back on YouTube after a month away. I've been doing nothing but grinding the tape, working, eating and sleeping pretty much ever since then, and I hope you followed along with my positional draft rankings over on my page Footballtalk.com. If you haven't done so until now, I'd highly suggest checking them out. I really don't believe there are more detailed prospect breakdowns available anywhere on the internet. Link is in the video description. Now what I want to talk about in this video are some of my personal favorites at each position, so not necessarily the best players at all these spots, but rather just guys that I'm really excited about and I'm significantly higher on than the consensus rankings that you find out there from different media outlets. So some may be well into my top 10, while others are a little further down the board, but still not nearly as far as other lists would suggest. Thank you to NFLMockDraftDatabase.com, who collect data from 60 different pages, such as NFL.com, Pro Football Focus, the Draft Network, etc., and create a big board that averages all of these out. I use those as a reference point for the discrepancy to my personal rankings, and I'll always mention for every player where they stand or are projected to go rather. Let's get right into this list, starting with the offensive side of the ball, and of course quarterback will be our first position to talk about. It's not a very deep class, so this isn't a sleeper or anything like that, but let's talk a little bit about Matt Corral from Ole Miss. Currently the quarterback 4 and 34th overall on the consensus big board. I would have originally gone with Malik Willis from Liberty here, who has been my QB1 since the fall, but the hype train has pushed him all the way to the top of the other rankings. To me, he's a more talented Jalen Hurts in terms of a very limited one-read pass at this point, but with the innate feel to extend plays and the strong low body as a runner. Either way, let's talk about Matt Corral instead here. Currently the only other guy that I see is worth a first round pick. He was the driving force under head coach Lane Kiffin for the RPO-heavy system, looking like a Heisman candidate over the first half of the season, but fracturing his ankle in the bowl game. What do I like about Corral? The quickest, most compact release of the class. His ability to get the ball in a hurry was key for all the quick RPO action that they were running at Ole Miss. However, he'll test the defense deep with high-arcing shots, routinely to force them to back off. He can throw some absolute lasers, at times with his feet cockeyed, and as he has to pull the ball down and find the targets coming from the opposite side. He has that suddenness in the pocket to reduce the throwing shoulder and almost hop into a clean platform to avoid rushers or extend plays. And the kid is tough, staring at the barrel of a gun as the rushers are caving in, and when he takes off as a runner, he was a much bigger part of the designed run game for the Rebels last season. There's very limited full field reads on his tape, but there's some flashes in that regard, and he's so twitchy to reset his base when he's going to the opposite side. Plus his pump fake game is the best in the class as well. The concerns that I have with him, this past season, slightly over 60% of his pass attempts came off play action or RPOs. That's an absurd rate, and along with that, over 600 yards of his total came on screens. That's so far away from anything that he'll do at the NFL level. He seemingly has no off button at times, meaning he will throw them balls into windows that others wouldn't even think about, particularly when he's already been able to get a secondary play and then lacks the maturity to understand when it's time to live for another day. And there are some instances in games where he just predetermines throws and lets it go down the post when his receiver is completely bracketed while somebody else is open underneath. There's no lack of toughness as a runner, but at 210 pounds, he will need to learn to protect himself better, which the ankle injury in the bowl game will hopefully be a wake-up call for him, and he also had 23 career fumbles. While Corral has close to zero experience with any NFL dropback concepts, and he will have to learn and make him more complex reads, I think with the ball placement and feel for where the leverage is and the open areas to attack that is clearly there, you have to dig through his tape to find stuff that you will see at the next level, but there are several traits at least that will translate to the next level, and he was much better at finding the check down and not forcing something that isn't there as frequently in 2021. Corral is far from a perfect prospect, but I'm a bit of a burnt child here by missing on Justin Herbert a couple of years ago coming out of Oregon, where I thought I didn't really see any growth in his ability to see the whole field and just a simplistic offense he was asked to run. At this point, I'd just much rather take a chance on somebody who I believe has some of the things that you can't coach and let him prove to me that he can learn to execute some of those NFL passing concepts rather than get somebody who can probably handle those, but I still have major issues within other areas that I'm not sure about if I can correct. An honorable mention here is Chase Garbers from Cal, currently the QB 20 in the 300s. Still have to watch my tape on him, but I've liked what I've seen so far as a solid backup potentially, and there are some names in front of him that I can't even envision playing quarterback at the next level. Which has us moving on to the second position here, running back, where we have Cameron Harris from Miami, who had just under 1,500 scrimmage yards and 17 touchdowns for his first 2 years with the Hurricanes, and was on pace for career highs across the board in 2021, but a knee injury ended his season 7 games in. What do I like about Harris? Very smooth with his transitions from east-west to north-south. He's able to spot call in the backfield and get upfield quickly, or go from pressing the A-gap to bouncing out wide in just one jump cut. Has good size at 210 pounds, but this guy can make some dramatic moves in the open field, juking sideways or setting up defenders and making hard cuts that cost them. He makes a bunch of guys flat out miss. He has those sweet feet, so you can forget that he's a pretty big guy and can bounce off some hits as well. With the way that he can set up defenders and get around them, Harris can consistently make flat defenders whiff and turn checkdowns into nice yardage, and he's actively approaching blitzes in the gap and taking charge of them in pass pro rather than sitting back on them. The concerns that I have with him, his feet and eyes aren't always married, where he's trying to plant and the foot gets too far outside his frame. He has to become more efficient in that regard. When he's driving in the backfield, he tends to dance around a little too much and lose a couple of yards in the process at times. As a receiver, he almost exclusively ran flat or swing routes, and he waits for the ball to get into his body. And he lets his off arm get too far out in front at times, which could lead to more fumbles at the next level. Harris could be more efficient as a mover in tight spaces, but he has the ankle and hip mobility to perfect that, while having great burst and special ability to make guys miss in the open field. I would like to see him run up to his size more often. He's unproven as a pass catcher beyond the line of scrimmage at least, but he has the potential to become one of the most complete backs in this draft in my opinion, and is a name that just keeps getting lost at times, I believe. He's currently the RB 46 and 471st overall prospect. He's right there at number 9 for the running backs for me, which is the exact same spot that I had another guy in a couple of years ago who has been pretty good in the NFL, which is James Robinson of the Jaguars. A couple of honorable mentions here. Zonovan Knight from NC State, currently the RB23, 224th overall. To me, an undervalued name because while he may lack some explosiveness, he can be a 3-down back in a rotational role at least, who is a master at manipulating second-level defenders, allowing his blocking to get set up and churn out yards through contact, while getting it done in the pass game too. And then Snoop Conner from Ole Miss, currently the RB40 in the 400s overall, who decided to skip his senior year, so I have to guess that the NFL is higher on him than these rankings would suggest. He may be a 2-down play at the next level with rather limited experience in terms of different run schemes, but I don't believe there's anybody in this group that I'd want to get in front of less, because he is some of the nastiest trucks that you will find on tape. Now we get to wide receiver, where I want to talk about Khalil Shakir from Boise State, who was already the quality receiver for the Broncos his first 3 years, but as a senior, he took his game to another level, touching the ball 98 times for 1,250 yards and 7 touchdowns, while also being dangerous in the return game. What I like about Shakir, he understands how to take leverages and get DBs tilted the wrong way before hitting sudden breaks and creating an opening. He has that kind of Keenan Allen quality to him as a route runner, with some unorthodox step sequencing and deceptiveness. He shows some good spatial awareness and adjusts his approach to the catch depending on the defenders around him, realizes when he's entering a soft spot against zone, and when it's better to body catch. But he also has some of the most spectacular grabs at full extension in this class. When the ball's in his hands, he seems to kick into another gear, and it's very elusive to slip by guys, while also running with the pads out in front when he can't avoid contact. And he does a nice job of establishing position as a blocker, walling off safeties in the run game. My concerns with him has that kind of lanky build, which isn't always optimal for the type of receiver that he is, where defenders get more information from watching his hips or legs, almost exclusively line up in the slot for the Broncos, basically never dealing with press. Alligator arms or tries to one-hand the ball a little too much for my taste, which manifested itself in 10 drops last year, and he's a little too herky-jerky when he catches the ball out in the flats instead of just taking what is there. Shakir will primarily be a slot receiver at the next level most likely, and he may not be optimal for a timing-based passing offense where you always need to cut right in that 5th step or whatever it is. However, he has some Keenan Allen to him like I already mentioned, and if you just let him release cleanly off the line and either route guys up in man or work himself open against shells, he can help you move the chains consistently. He's currently going as the wide receiver 16, 93rd overall. I have him 3 spots higher on the receivers, and it's all the inside my top 100, which I haven't quite finalized. A couple of honorable mentions here. Christian Watts from North Dakota State, now going as wide receiver 7, 43rd overall, which is about where I value him as well, maybe a little bit higher. He's another guy I was high on early in the process, but the hype train has just gone crazy since he blew up the combine after already dominating senior bowl practices. Love his size speed profile, and he has some killer blocking skills, even though he's not a very refined route runner at this point. And then Tay Martin from Oklahoma State, currently going as wide receiver 44 in the 300s. I have him about 20 spots higher. He had a pretty impressive showing at East West Shrine practices, consistently beating defensive backs across the face on in-breaking routes, and not allowing them to wrap around him for PBUs. I still gotta dive into some more of these receivers in the 30s, but I like his feet off the line and the smarts as a route runner. At the tight end position, I went with James Mitchell from Virginia Tech, one of the forgotten names in this draft, due to tearing his ACL 2 games into last season. He caught 47 passes for over 800 yards and 11 touchdowns through his first 2 years there. He popped off the tape to me when I was watching film on Khalil Herbert and ACC defenders a year ago. And what I really like about Mitchell, as a blocker, works with controlled steps, a flat back, hands into the frame, and keeps his feet moving. He can easily pin linebackers and safeties on the inside when the ball's going out to the perimeter, and he's one of the best screen blockers that you will find. He displays good burst off the line and is pretty elusive with working around contact to avoid getting bumped into his routes. So good at tracking the ball when it comes in over his head, but also to work back towards underthrown passes. Overall, he shows excellent concentration to bring in catches, with defenders contesting and the toughness to hold onto them with safety barreling down on him. He has the flexibility and sticky hands to block the ball and only dropped 3 of 55 catchable targets in his career. And then he smoothly turns upfield once the catch is secured, can stop quickly to slide inside of pursuit defenders, but is also happy to drop the shoulder and run through guys. The concerns I have with him, obviously he's recovering from the torn ACL. He's not an overpowering blocker at the point of attack to really widen the C-gap, and there's too much of a backstep when trying to release from tight or wing alignments, delaying him in his stem to his routes. He doesn't have that extra burst to separate down the field against defenders in trail position, and he's not going to run away from secondary defenders necessarily. Going back to his high school days, where he was a basketball player, you see it a little bit of time still when he's in pass routes, but Mitchell also shows the willingness and physicality to be a quality asset blocking in line. He may not impress with natural speed or power, but he's a crafty player who brings the right effort all around, I believe. The torn ACL will push him down the boards, and I would feel a bit better about the evaluation if I had testing numbers on him, but I believe Mitchell can be a productive receiver at all 3 levels, and if you utilize his ability to block on the move, he can help you open up the playbook. He's currently going as tight end 16, 220th overall. I have him right there at number 10 as a 4th to 5th rounder. A couple of honorable mentions here. Greg Dulcich from UCLA, currently going as tight end 4, 88th overall. I have him penciled in as my T2 currently. A lot of work has to be done technically, and he has to firm up his base to help you as a blocker, but nobody can threaten the seams quite like him, catches the ball confidently away from his frame, and can quickly eat up ground for those long strides after the grab. And then Cole Turner from Nevada, who's currently going as tight end 13, 188th overall. To me, a slightly lesser version of Mike Gesicki coming out of college, not a ton after the catch, and mostly a big body slot who can also line up on the outside, but a very crafty route runner who shows the toughness to catch the ball in crowded areas. Moving on to the offensive line, we start with tackle with Corral from North Dakota State. Over the course of his career with the Bison, he appeared in 65 games and started the final 41, with all but 10 of them coming at right tackle. Other than the COVID-delayed 2020-21 spring season that they had, the Bison averaged 272 rushing yards and won the FCS championship in all 4 of his years there. What do I like about Volson? Coming from a post-out rushing attack, he has experience with a variety of run schemes. What stands out right away when you watch him as a run blocker is his understanding for how to take his initial steps and hit the right aiming points. He operates from a wide base and lets those massive thighs do the work, routinely taking defenders for a ride. And he showcases sufficient ability to climb up to the second level and bury some linebackers. He consistently keeps his feet underneath himself in pass protection, and he offers a strong anchor and rides defenders past the arc when they try to really get their speed rush going. I thought he also showed tremendous awareness and protection to recognize twists and even slot blitzers. And when you look at the numbers, he never gave up a sack over 41 games as a starter for the Bison, along with only 14 total pressures and just over 1,000 pass blocking snaps these last 3 years. What are my concerns with him? You see him get too far out in front of his toes at times, and NFL defenders who know how to pull cloth effectively will make him slip off blocks in the run game. Having done my initial evaluation of Volson, along with eventual Titans second rounder Dylan Radunes a year ago, this guy isn't quite as fleet-footed as his teammate on the opposite end was, and he wasn't asked to take a lot of vertical pass sets with how heavily they relied on the run game and play action shots at North Dakota State. And he looks a bit heavy-footed when getting out in space on screens or scrambles. There were worries about Volson's lack of length, but with 34-inch arms, that's perfectly fine. He did kick into guard during East-West Shrine practices and quickly acclimated himself to it, driving guys off the ball laterally to create cutback lanes while holding his ground pass protection. He doesn't have ideal athleticism for playing on the edge and will be challenged with a lot more stand-up pass sets, but I think he'll be drafted on day 3 and could easily become a star at guard or right tackle a couple years in. He's the consensus OT20 and going 200th overall. I have him right in the 12 to 13 range for a position. And a couple of other guys I want to mention here. Spencer Burford from UTSA, currently going as OT17, 177th overall. He's my OT10. Love his explosion off the snap and ability to create movement at the point of attack. Tremendous reactive quickness to come off combos, and knows how to maximize his nearly 35-inch arms in pass pro, but just not a ton of sand in his pants and vulnerable to inside counters. And then Luke Goedeke from Central Michigan, not quite sure how to pronounce it. He's offensive tackle 13 in the 150s overall right now. Right around that range from me as well, but just feel like the major rankings all have him several spots lower. He's not getting enough love because of Bernard Ryman on the other side, who I like as a first round pick myself. But Goedeke is a very technically sound, tough player whose length and athleticism are really the only two concerns that we have with him. And then as we move to the interior, I want to look at Luke Fortner from Kentucky, who moved over to center in 2021 and turned that into a first-team All-ACC season. What do I like about Fortner? There's no pause whatsoever between the snap and his first step. He creates nice lateral movement in his own run game and seamlessly transitions to the second level. His ability to continue bringing his hips around and steal guys away from the play is as good as it gets in his class. He's very quick to get on his horse and has shown the ability to pin plays at linebackers inside or even get up to safeties in the screen game at times. Fortner really latches those hands into the chest of interior rushers and has the feet to stay engaged when they try to take wider angles around him. He has easy movement skills where he can pick up and stay in front of blitzing linebackers on an island, and because he maintains good knee bend deep into plays, he can withstand bull rush attempts sufficiently. The concern with him, he tends to overextend and have his pads way out in front at times in pass pro, where he mirrors sideways movement in particular. Almost too eager to come off the down lineman he originally slid towards because his eyes get trapped on the opposite side. I don't believe Fortner is a great fit for a gap scheme based rushing attack necessarily if he's asked to uproot defensive tackles out of their space. And while I love his ability to get out in space, he wants to look back and find his teammate with the ball way too much instead of just blocking whoever is in his path. Watching Senior Bowl practices the first time, I didn't really feel like Fortner necessarily had a dominant showing, but going back through those one-on-one reps again, I realized that he didn't actually lose any straight up ever, as he did an excellent job of staying in front of guys with very active footwork and strong grip on defenders. So that combined with his smarts to recognize pressures and work his way through games up front, I don't have much of a concern with him in pass pro. And then in the run game, I believe there are some schematical limitations maybe, in terms of him maybe not perfectly being suited for a vertically oriented approach, but the way he can steal defenders and even be a useless puller himself simply commands a plan for how to maximize those strengths, while he should excel in any type of zone-based scheme. I was shocked with how good the tape really was, and he should be a lock for day 2 in my opinion. Currently going as IOL 10, 117th overall. I firmly have him inside my top 100, and I like him better than his teammate Darren Kennard actually. A couple of honorable mentions here. Donovan West from Arizona State, the center, currently going as IOL 17. Love his movement skills, and he plays bigger than his 305 to 310 pound frame would suggest. Great fit in a wide zone based rushing attack, although powerful defenders shooting up the A-gap could give him some problems. And then Lessiter Smith from Virginia Tech, I think that's how to pronounce it, IOL 15 and the 150s as well. Brings heavy hands and a tone-setting attitude in the run game, and tremendous anchor to hold his ground pass pro. Just needs to work on his angles towards the second level. Which has us moving on to the defensive side of the ball, and we start on the edge with Drake Jackson from USC. The former number 6 defensive end recruit in 2019, Jackson already announced prior to the 21 season that this will be his last one, and he leaves USC with 25 career tackles for loss and half as many sacks in 27 total games. What do I like about him? He really creates issues in the run game with a pop in his hands to set the edge and the short area quickness to back down blockers. When he's left unblocked altogether away from the action, he has the speed to flatten down the line and chase down fast running backs. And man, does this guy have some shake to him as a pass rusher. He's truly one of those guys who you have to respect being able to win inside and out. He has incredible flexibility to dip underneath the reach of tackles and win on ghost or rip moves. His ability to stab at the chest of blockers and keep them off himself on one-on maneuvers is something that you see all over his tape. Last year, he quietly put up 26 total pressures on 182 pass rush snaps, and he's a very loose mover in space when you peel him off into coverage. Also showed that at the combine. The concerns that I have with him, not a very disciplined run defender, whether it's jumping inside of guys on the edge or letting quarterbacks get around him and keeping the ball in zone reads or bootlegs. He's still learning how to read run schemes properly and not just go after the ball, but rather deconstruct blocks. As a pass rusher, he overruns the arc on too many occasions, not showing the ability to shorten his path by transitioning to power. And as much as I like Jackson's ability to beat tackles inside, when opponents do have the post leg ready to mirror, he doesn't show the quick secondary hand swipes to win anyway. With his movement skills and natural athleticism, I believe Jackson could develop into an excellent rush linebacker. In terms of rushing the passer, he's at his best as a wide 9 technique, where his ability to bend around the corner and cross-face tackles who overset him really stands out about him. He's not a reliable edge setter in a more defined run fits, and he lacks some of the power element as a pass rusher, but I just don't get how he's been so overlooked in his class. This guy has some elite traits for an edge defender, and he still has plenty of room to grow. To me, he's a no-doubt top 10 prospect at the position. Somewhat surprisingly to me, compared to the other stuff that I checked out already, consensus he's the edge 9 and 56th overall, but I think that's more about big boards that are mostly from a year ago, since I rarely see him inside the top 10 for the position. I personally have him as a top 50 overall prospect. A couple of honorable mentions here: Joshua Pascal from Kentucky, who's edge 15 and 19th overall on the big board, who I have one spot behind Jackson's edge 9 myself. Reminds me a lot of Deo Odeyingbo coming out of Vanderbilt a year ago. Impressive explosion of the snap, and this combination of twitchiness and power is really awesome, just not a very refined pass rush at this point. And then Myjai Sanders from Cincinnati, edge 13, 75th overall, kind of getting lost in the shuffle here. I usually see him even lower than this, but dude is such a freaky athlete who can win in a bunch of ways against the run and pass, just has that lanky build and was allowed to freelance a lot, so that's kind of the concern with him. And then on the interior defensive line, we get to Eric Johnson, Missouri State, a red unknown guy. He played on the school record 55 consecutive games as a 5-year starter and was recognized as an All-Mountain Valley Football Conference second-team selection these past 2 seasons respectively. He finished his career with 131 total tackles, including 19.5 of those for loss and 6.5 sacks. What do I like about Johnson? Has that 4-eye, 5 technique body type and looked like he really belonged with those FBS standouts at the college All-Star events. Actually was promoted for the NFL PA Bowl to the Senior Bowl and really more than held his own. His wrestling background shows up constantly in the way that he can fight to own his space in the run game, comes in with low pads, a powerful base, and locks out forcefully at the point of attack. When he's unblocked on the backside, the way that he can curve his path and his pursuit are pretty crazy for a 300-pounder. In the pass game, he has the power to drive guards back into quarterback's lap with full extension in his arms and that 82.5-inch wingspan. Yet his initial quickness and ability to beat blockers across the face is something that really stood out to me when given true one-on-ones in the pass game, on game tape and the college All-Star events. He flashed a pretty stunning spin move for the interior rusher to get home after his rush initially stalled, and he can corner very effectively for a guy's size. Some of the concerns with him: I thought his superior power and athleticism allowed him to be a great player at the FCS level, despite lacking advanced football IQ at this point, where he's not really able to recognize run schemes quickly. In the pass game, there's very little instant wins, and there's too many reps where he just mindlessly tries to push guys back into the pocket. The connection points on his hand swipes are pretty wild at this point, and he doesn't yet understand how to really counter the different hand strikes that blockers want to use against him. And Johnson tries to look over the top of blockers too much for my taste as well, instead of focusing on getting home on his rushes. After kind of shocking offensive linemen with his quickness off the snap during NFLPA practices, suddenly dipping the shoulder and getting around guys in one-on-ones, I thought his physicality really stood out during Senior Bowl practices, as he got called up by Jim Nagy, moving big men backwards in the run game and creating push up the pocket. He certainly looked like he belonged there with those FBS standouts, and I really like the skill set that he presents. He's currently going as IDL 17 and 222nd overall. I have him at number 9 and actually released that list this past Saturday if you want to check it out. My honorable mention in this category: the first one, Ioma Uwazurike from Iowa State, IDL 16 and the 200s overall. Such a long, strong dude. Not great at any part of his game quite yet, but he can play up and down the line and create problems for an offense with highly impressive flexibility. And then Derek Tangelo from Penn State, who's going at IDL 55 currently in the 500s, so well undrafted. I think I have him as 16 overall for the position, which is kind of crazy, that discrepancy. Nobody talks about this guy, but you watch the Penn State edge guys, he flashes multiple times every game. Not a very diverse rush plan at this point, but could be a disruptive free technique in my opinion. Which brings us to linebacker, or rather linebackers, because I wanted to put all of these together, since all 3 of them from the Big 12 and underrated in my opinion. We're talking about Terrell Bernard from Baylor, Mike Rose from Iowa State, and Malcolm Rodriguez from Oklahoma State. Bernard is linebacker 14 in the 130s, and Rose and Rodriguez, linebacker 17 and 18 respectively, both in the early 200s overall. I personally have them as linebacker 12, 14, and 15. Let's just quickly break them down, each of them. Bernard, a very downhill-oriented run defender with hands ready to punch and no issues mixing up with guards, despite only being 225 pounds. Active communicator in zone coverage with great spatial awareness and a quick trigger to come upfield. Just has only 30-inch arms and has been fighting for some nicks and bruises in his career, but a smart team leader, and there's plenty of guys who excel at that size when they see and feel where the ball is going, which I see a lot with him. Then Rose packs another 20 to 25 pounds, and he can also dip underneath blockers and is disciplined in his run fits. Keeps pushing on the quarterback as a middle zone defender, but doesn't let himself get pulled out of there for no reason, and delivers some real thump as a blitzer. He may not have the explosive burst to cut off angles, and almost purely the shallow zone duties in coverage, but I like the package that he presents. And then finally Rodriguez, a guy who gets no respect it seems like. In terms of instincts and eyes to decipher plays and get to the ball, he's right up there with the very best. And he plays hard, man. I also like the way that he can gain depth in coverage, and he tested a lot better than people anticipated. Just a guy with some length concerns at 5'11 and short arms, and usually guys get into his frame too much. But I'll gladly take any of these three guys early on day 3, which has us moving on to the secondary. Firstly at cornerback with Jack Jones from Arizona State. Once the number 2 overall cornerback recruit all the way back in 2016, and he looked like a star early on for USC, but then was ruled academically ineligible and dismissed from the team, along with having a legal issue. But he had an excellent second career with the Sun Devils, and I think has been overlooked here as well. What do I like so much about Jones? There's not a lot of 180-pound corners you will ever see get in the face of perimeter receivers quite like this guy. He's the one setting the tone a lot of times against 6'4 receivers and drive guys into the sideline. He can disrupt releases, has the quick feet to mirror off the line, and the snappy hips to flip against the releases. His click and close on routes is breathtaking, and your quarterback better not telegraph his throws against zone. Jones has plenty of experience capping over routes in deep zone coverage, and didn't let guys get behind him. And he's really feisty at attacking through the catch point, while refusing to stay blocked in the run or screen game. He had a great one-on-one battle with USC star receiver Amon-Ra St. Brown in the 2020 season opener, and helped the Sun Devils nearly pull off the upset against his former team. The concerns with him are fairly obvious. As much as you love the competitive spirit, there's no doubt Jones is very small, and you see guys be able to create some separation late with push-offs. His lack of length also shows up when he's seemingly in perfect position to contest throws, but he just can't quite reach around the receiver. At his size, there's a lot of drag tackles and yards after contact, and obviously he has that mark passed, which also pushed back his pro career, as he will turn 25 before his rookie season is over. Still, he's one of my favorites to watch in this entire draft. I love his competitiveness in feet and coverage. He didn't allow receivers to stack vertically against him during East West Shrine Week, pitting the outside arm of those guys and not allowing them to pump their arms to get to full speed. With how much more we see corners playing from depth and driving on routes in the NFL, he could be a steal late. Currently going as cornerback 36, 258 overall. I have him as cornerback 16, so there's 20 spots in between there. And a few honorable mentions here. Cam Taylor-Britt from Nebraska, currently going as cornerback 18, 123rd overall. Elite recovery speed and super physical and run support. Technically there are some false steps and things that you have to clean up, but he's somebody I want to get my hands on. Personally I have him as my cornerback 8. And then a couple of deeper names here. Jalen Watson from Washington State, cornerback 25, and Bryce Watts from UMass, cornerback 48. I have both inside my top 20 personally. And then finally we get to the safety position, where I want to talk a little bit about Jaquan Brisker from Penn State. The number 1 safety recruit in 2019, Brisker quickly turned himself into a key cog for the Nittany Lions defense. As well as 3 years as a starter, he recorded 5 interceptions, 14 pass breakups, and 10 tackles for loss, which earned him second team All-American honors last year. This guy plays downhill constantly and brings the physicality of a linebacker. He confidently steps down and fills gaps against the run as a man of the box. It is quick to shoot up the alley, and if a blocker gets him in his way, he's usually the first one to initiate contact. This past season, he was playing through a shoulder harness, and his missed tackles jumped from 1 all the way to 10, but I like his ability to pace his steps and break down, along with being able to lay the wood. So that's not as much of a concern for me, having that knowledge about the shoulder injury. He shows outstanding awareness of where everybody is on the field in coverage. Not elite, but very good range. In 2021, we saw a lot more man coverage from him, where Brisker was matched up against several different body types and got the job done for the most part. And last season overall, he limited opposing quarterbacks to just 12 completions for 105 yards and 1 touchdown on 21 targets, while intercepting 2 of those himself. The concerns that they have with Brisker, he can get a little too aggressive with his angles working across the field. As a center field on the other hand, he tends to float very deep and give receivers plenty of room to operate behind the underneath coverage. In general, I'd say he's definitely better going forward than backwards, where as a single high safety, he's too easily manipulated by the quarterback's eyes. And in an NFL, where you see a lot more too high shells and safeties being asked to be interchangeable with playing the deep post, some evaluators may prefer other options, because he was primarily deployed in the box or as a robber last season. Personally, Brisker is still one of my favorite players overall in this entire draft. His aggressiveness in run support, the ability to play through contact in the box, his tackling skills, at least when healthy, and his overall feel for the game made me a fan. Now, I don't want him to be used as a single high free safety necessarily, and at times he needs to be a little more conservative with his angles, but there's a lot to like here in terms of talent and demeanor on the field, and I think he cemented himself as one of the top safeties with the athletic testing, having numbers above the 80th percentile across the board between Combine and Pro Day. On the consensus board, he's safety 4 right now, 44th overall, mostly number 5 among safeties, however, from the list that I've seen. I have him in a battle for safety 2 or safety 3 currently, as I'm finishing up at that position. A couple of honorable mentions here: Louis Seam from Georgia, now up to safety 3, 35th overall, which is about where I had him going all along. Once again, people just going crazy about the combine numbers, but I just love his physicality charging up the alley, where you see him going up against guys like 230-pound back Brian Robinson from Alabama, and stop him dead in his tracks at contact. He excels at reading route stems and anticipating patterns, but he has had his issues when slot receivers take him vertically. And then a guy further down the board, Quentin Lake from UCLA, was currently safety 18 and going to 200s. Nothing that really stands out about him athletically, but so good at reading the body language of receivers and putting himself in the right position. He's a great fit for one of those modern split safety defenses in my opinion. And now here's a quick look at the full list once again, starting with quarterback Matt Corral from Ole Miss, running back Cameron Harris from Miami, wide receiver Khalil Shakir from Boise State, tight end James Mitchell from Virginia Tech, offensive tackle Cordell Volson from North Dakota State, who some guys like better as a guard, the center Luke Fortner from Kentucky, then on defense, edge rusher Drake Jackson from USC, interior D-line Eric Johnson from Missouri State, 3 linebackers I talked about, Terrell Bernard from Baylor, Mike Rose from Iowa State, and Malcolm Rodriguez from Oklahoma State, and then in the secondary, cornerback Jack Jones from Arizona State, and safety Jaquan Brisker from Penn State. Let me know what you think about these guys, and if there are any other diamonds in the rough, so to speak, that you really like personally. That's gonna do it for me. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe to our channel, share it with a couple of friends. Once again, if you're a fan of the draft, I think my positional analysis are second to none, definitely in terms of the freely available stuff out there. The link to my page on Footballtalk.com is in the video description. This week I got the tight ends and safeties coming out still, before I finish off with the quarterbacks, and then I'll present my top 100 big board next week. And then of course we still got my final mock draft coming out, which I'll do a video on again here on YouTube, before the draft is already here. I've been grinding more this year than ever before, so if you like my work, please make sure to let other people know, and I hope you'll visit my page. So until then, see you later. Peace!